Here's the process for multiplying rational expressions. The steps for multiplying rational expressions are as follows. The first thing we need to do is to factor the numerators and denominators completely. The second step is to write as a single rational expression, in other words, as a single fraction, by multiplying the numerators and multiplying the denominators together. And then finally, simplify by reducing ratios of common and or opposite factors. Common factors will divide out to 1, and opposite factors will divide out to -1. So in this example, we're asked to multiply 2x squared minus 16x plus 14 divided by x minus 8 times x plus 7 over x squared minus 49. The first thing to do is to factor all numerators and denominators completely. So let's attempt to factor the first numerator. Looking at the numerator, it's a trinomial. I'm seeing a common factor among the three terms of 2. So let's factor out a 2 from all three terms. That's always the first step, is if there's a common factor, factor out the common factor. So in parentheses left over after we factor out a 2, we'll have x squared minus 8x plus 7. In the denominator, 8x minus 8, similarly there's a common factor here of 8. So let's factor out the 8, and that would leave us with x minus 1 in parentheses. For the second fraction, the numerator is x plus 7. There's no way to factor x plus 7. There's no common factor, so x plus 7 just needs to get copied down. For the denominator, x squared minus 49, that's a difference of squares, so that can be factored by breaking open two sets of parentheses for the two factors. And what times what is x squared? That would be x times x. And then what times itself is 49? That would be 7 times 7. With differences of squares, one of the signs is a minus and the other one is a plus to make it work out properly. -7 times +7 is -49. And the positive 7x and the negative 7x cancel each other, and the middle term is gone. So let's size it up and see if we have factored the numerators and denominators completely. The first numerator has a trinomial, which possibly could be factored further. So to continue this simplification process, we'll need to try to factor x squared minus 8x plus 7. It may or may not factor. Let's give it a shot. So break open two sets of parentheses. Think what times what will give us the first term of the trinomial, x squared, and that would have to be x times x. And now think what times what would give us the last term of the trinomial, which is 7, and that's going to have to be 7 times 1. To get the middle term to work out to -8x, we could place negative signs in both factors. That's going to give us a -1x and a -7x, which will add up to -8x, and we also will get the proper sign on the 7. -7 times -1 is +7. So the numerator is factored completely now of the first rational expression. The denominator cannot be factored any further, 8 times x minus 1, so let's just copy that down. As for the numerator of the second rational expression here, x plus 7 cannot be factored any further, and we've already factored the denominator as much as we can. It's x minus 7 times x plus 7. So we've completed the first step. We've factored the numerators and denominators completely. Now we need to write it as a single rational expression, a single fraction, by multiplying the numerators together, the numerator factors, and then multiplying the denominator factors together. So let's see, we've got 2 times x minus 7 times x minus 1. I'm expressing it as a single fraction now, times x plus 7. I put parentheses around the x plus 7 here so that it's all in factored form with the factors being multiplied together. In the denominator, we have 8 times x minus 1 times x minus 7 times x plus 7. So I just simply multiplied the numerator factors here by this numerator factor and wrote it all as one numerator, and then multiplied these two denominator factors by these two denominator factors, wrote it all as a single denominator. The last step is to see if we can reduce it all. So I'm looking for common factors or opposite factors. I see a common factor of x minus 7 there and there that we can reduce, and x minus 7 divided by x minus 7 is 1. I also see a common factor right here of x plus 7, so we can divide the x plus 7 by the x plus 7 and reduce those, and that's also a 1. And then I see a common factor of x minus 1 that we can also reduce there, and those divide out to a 1 as well. So everything has reduced or canceled except for the 2 and the 8, and 2 and 8 are both divisible by 2. So instead of leaving it as 8, it might be helpful to write 8 as 2 times 4, or think of 8 as 2 times 4. And then we can simply reduce 2 divided by 2, which is 1. So for our final answer, we have a 4 in the denominator, and then just a bunch of 1s being multiplied together in the numerator, which is 1. So the final result is 1/4. That's the simplified answer for the product of those two rational expressions. Here's a second example. Multiply 3y minus 12x over y squared minus x squared times xy plus y squared over 4x minus y. The first step of the process is factor the numerators and denominators completely. So let's try to factor the first numerator. Between a 3y and a 12x, there's a common factor of 3 that we can factor out from both terms. So factoring out a 3, that'll give us 3 times y minus 4x. For the denominator, it appears to be a difference of squares, so we can break open two sets of parentheses and factor the denominator using the difference of squares technique. It's going to be y times y to get y squared, x times x to get x squared. One of the signs is always a negative, and the other sign is a positive when factoring a difference of squares. For the second rational expression here, in the numerator we've got two terms, and they do have something in common. They have a common factor of y. So if we factor out the y from both terms, that will leave us in parentheses with x plus y. Y times x is xy, and then y times y makes y squared. For the denominator, 4x minus y, it's just two terms, and they don't appear to have anything in common, so there's no way to factor the denominator of the second rational expression. Let's just leave it 4x minus y. So let's take a look at everything. Can anything be factored any further? The first numerator cannot be factored any further. The first denominator can't be factored any further. The second numerator and the second denominator, they're factored as much as they can be factored as well. So everything is factored completely. The next thing to do is to write a single rational expression by multiplying the numerators and multiplying the denominators. Let's write it as one fraction, in other words. So as a single fraction now, we've got 3 times y minus 4x. If you want to write little multiplication dots in here, you can. And then times y times x plus y. Little multiplication dots are optional, they're implied. And then in the denominator, we've got y minus x times y plus x times 4x minus y. So I've done the second step, writing it as a single rational expression. The final step is to simplify by reducing ratios of common and or opposite factors to 1 or negative 1. So taking a look at what we have, do we have any common factors? X plus y and y plus x are exactly the same factor. Y plus x is just the reverse of x plus y. It's equivalent by the commutative property of addition, so those divide out to 1. Any other common factors that you see? I don't see any other common factors, but I do see a pair of opposite factors. Y minus 4x and 4x minus y are opposite factors. So when you divide opposite factors, they simplify to a negative 1. So reducing the two opposite factors there, we get a result of negative 1. That's everything that can be reduced. So for a final answer, in the numerator we've got a 3 times a negative 1 times a y. So that would be negative 3y in the numerator. And then in the denominator we've got y minus x. So we can express the result as negative 3y over y minus x. This is acceptable for the answer. And there's other ways that it could be written. So a negative sign in a result can be placed out in front of the fraction, or with the denominator, or with the numerator. So some folks would write it like this, the negative of 3y over y minus x. This is also an acceptable simplified result. And then also, it's possible to place the negative with the denominator. So we could put the negative sign with the denominator and write it as 3y over the negative of y minus x. And that would likely be simplified by most people to this. 3y over, if we distribute the negative through the parentheses, it becomes a negative y and then a positive x, which for a final simplified result would be expressed as 3y over x minus y, just simply switching the order of the two terms in the denominator to make it look a little more natural. So all three of those green boxed answers there are equivalent, and they're all the result of multiplying those two rational expressions.